And today was a day just like any other.
Wasted on you, and every word you say something sweet, 'cause all I taste is blood between my teeth as I'm fighting the words. You're getting away. Well, I'm ready to drive. I'm ready. I'm ready, so don't stop. I'm ready, so don't stop. Keep pushing. I'm ready to fall. I'm ready. I'm ready, so don't come. I'm ready, so don't come. I am aware I've been misled. I disconnect my heart, my head. Don't wanna recognize when things go bad. The things that you'll accept that I am finding the words to say I'm ready. I'm ready to drive. I'm ready. I'm ready, so don't stop. I'm ready, so don't stop.
I wake up to find it's another Fort Asper morning and I dive in. I put on the same clothes I wore yesterday. When did society decide that we have to change and wash a t-shirt after every individual use? If it's not dirty, I'm gonna wear it. I take the stairs to the car and there's fog on the windows.
I'm finding the words.
I need caffeine in my bloodstream. I take caffeine to the bloodstream. I grip the wheel, and all at once I realize
And you're getting away.
my life has become a boring pop song and everyone's singing along.
I'm ready. I'm ready to drive. Well, I'm ready. I'm ready, so don't stop. Well, keep pushing. I'm ready to fall. Well, I'm ready, so don't call. I'm ready, so don't
Welcome back to Bold Like a Leopard, and we're going to do another follow-up stream to talk about the Twitter files. But I do want to get to the more recent news of the evening, and that's to announce, officially that the 2022 midterms are over, and it ends with one more humiliating defeat for the Republicans. It's not something that you can just wave away. So this is from the Daily Beast. Raphael Warnock takes down Herschel Walker in the Georgia runoff. So let me actually go to the yeah. So Senate runoff. It came down to about a 51.2% to 48.8% split. Okay, so that's not as narrow of a projection as it was early in the evening. I was actually following along as it was happening, but it's also not very wide. And I think that the result of the evening, so Herschel Walker lost by about 85,000 votes in this case. It shows that even if you can see that the Republicans are in bad shape, which I do, I don't buy any of this stuff about how it was actually a victory because they won the House. A lot of the people who are now trying to say, well, let's look at the positive, look at all these, random seats that they won, and look at all the progress that the Republicans made in New York. A lot of these people were saying before the election that anything less than a crushing victory, some historic taking of the House plus, maybe winning plus 20 more seats or whatever. A lot of those people are now trying to deflect and go and say, we have to focus on the positive and look at the fact that they won the House and what can be salvaged from that. And I'm not one of those people. I've started to look at these elections as really a reflection of how terrible of a shape the country is in. Because if Raphael Warnock can win re-election, despite the fact that he was representing a president that's pretty unpopular in Georgia, despite the fact that he has his own skeletons in the closet regarding his domestic violence, which are probably about as bad as Herschel Walker's. And also despite the fact that he had another scandal regarding I think it's a condo building or apartment building that his church ran, and they've been evicting people, even though he's been calling for eviction moratoriums. Despite all of that, he won, and he didn't win by a massive margin, but he won. And people might start reflexively saying, well, this was rigged or whatever. I don't believe it was rigged in this case. It's not like we've been on pins and needles waiting for a week like it happened in Georgia, in Arizona. Arizona has continued to have the same issues as they had in 2020. And Georgia, I think they seem to have figured out what they got wrong. And they went and their process, I guess, went a little smoother. If people want to talk about any irregularities, they have to show proof of it. This was just simply a combination of two things. One problem was that I think Republicans got lazy, and they started to think that all you have to do is have President Biden do a terrible job, and the people will just show up and vote. They don't reckon for the fact that it doesn't matter how terrible the situation is. It doesn't matter how terrible of a job the people in power are. They often are able to, first of all, raise a lot of money and dump a lot of ads into the mix. And secondly, they have the media on their side. And when you have those issues already clouding your chances of victory, you can't just depend on a candidate like Herschel Walker. One of the other things I noticed during the race, I listened to Clay Travis. He was predicting he's actually silent on this today, which is, it shows a little bit that I think he knows he made a bad bet on this. I think he actually bet money on it. What happened with Herschel Walker was that I think many Republicans were thinking he would coast to victory based simply on the fact that he was a superstar in college football. He was the greatest player in Georgia Bulldogs history. And therefore, the people of Georgia would overlook any personal flaws that he has or his unpolished demeanor. Like all of his, honestly, when you listen to him during the race, he was not going to be a great senator. He was basically a figurehead. And a lot of the criticisms that the Democrats leveled at him, they didn't really have an answer for, because all he would say is he would repeat some of the platitudes about how he's trying to he's trying to bring the state back together, and he's not one of these candidates of division. And I agree with his message, but that's not a message that's actually inspiring. And a lot of these voters who I think would have gone for a candidate that was more subdued and just boring. I don't think that they were actually brought out by Herschel Walker. There was a lot of evidence that he actually kept some voters away, and it's pretty sad to say that. I don't think that you can excuse this race from Herschel Walker. He knew that he had a personal history when he chose to run, and he has to bear the results of it. But the other people that have to bear the results for it, I think certainly President Trump, deciding very early to back Herschel Walker. This was another case. He wanted a celebrity. He wanted the person with the notoriety. He thought that would be the winning candidate. He doesn't get it. All you needed was a person who would be competent and normal and could actually debate the facts in a more rational manner. Now, Herschel Walker still made the result pretty close, but close doesn't count. And who cares when, in the end, this was the seat that determines the control of the Senate? You can't have somebody who's just going to be close. So I'm very interested to see how President Trump reacted to that. Let me see if he actually put a truth out. Our country is in big trouble. What a mess. So that's what he put in. Let me see what the reactions are to this. Yeah, there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, there must be a military coup and whatever." A lot of it's the same people, QAnon people, who still think this can just be saved by memeing that there's a Q. There's still people, I think, that are dumb enough to believe in the whole QAnon thing. And that's what's so depressing, that the country may be completely off kilter, and there's no, there's no responsible person in charge. You have President Biden, who today, he actually said, after the results were in Georgia, and not in Georgia, but after the whole election is concluded in Arizona, and supposedly the Democrats are committed to helping to, resolve the issues that have happened there. And they were asking, Peter Doocy asked President Biden why he's not visiting the border. Now, Peter Doocy, I should have had this open, but I do a lot of this show on the fly simply because here we go. So he asks President Biden, how come if he's going to Arizona? I don't know why I keep messing them up. How come if he's going to Arizona, he's not going to visit the border? Well, here's the answer.
The border. Let's watch.
Visit the border because there's a more important thing going on. They're going to invest billions of dollars in a new enterprise.
Mr. President, the power outages in North Carolina.
I don't know.
Do you have any idea who's behind it?
No, we don't yet. I'm running that down. I got to brief this morning.
Mr. President,
have to reject the Section Marriage Act. They say harm religious freedom. That's the business. What's your response to that? I disagree. Any fear?
You can just see him sort of lumber off like some sort of corpse. So that's the person who's in the White House. He's saying, "Oh, I have more important things to do in Arizona than actually visit the border," and that's the person in charge. And yet the Republicans couldn't win it to save their lives. That's because the party is run by incompetent people. I don't think that it's only one camp that's incompetent. A lot of people pile on Mitch McConnell. I certainly think Mitch McConnell is partially to blame for this, because the fact is that he backed Herschel Walker just as much as Trump.
The president's about to take off for Arizona.
1 second. So, sorry. he actually backed Herschel Walker very early in the race and said, yeah, he's definitely going to be a great candidate. Turned out he wasn't a great candidate. And, Mitch McConnell said that, and so did Donald Trump. So it's basically across the board an indictment of both the establishment and the MAGA group within the GOP. Both of them supported a candidate who was a bad candidate. And for people to now pin the blame and point the finger on one another, it just shows how terrible of a shape the party is in. So, that's one of the real difficulties of being somebody who comments on the news. And a lot of the people in my life are very partisan. They consider themselves Republicans. They consider themselves Trump supporters. Sometimes you just have to accept that the other side won, not only because they may have worked a little harder, right? In this case, in Georgia, I think they worked harder and spent a lot more money and were desperate enough to do anything in order to push Warnock across the line, but also because these people aren't willing to admit that it was mistakes on the part of the GOP to have people like Herschel Walker be candidates. Look, I have no ill will towards Herschel Walker as a person. I think he had, definitely a good athletic career, and I don't really care about his personal life, and I don't care about the drama and his issues with his family, and as for the abortions, I wonder if we'll ever hear anything about it again, since he's not a candidate anymore. Will there ever be any proof that's provided that he actually paid for these abortions? I don't know. It's probably the same as the Roy Moore case, if you remember that, when they accused Roy Moore, who was a Senate candidate in Alabama, of all these creepy encounters with women. And then once the race was over, suddenly it wasn't important anymore. They didn't need the proof. So there was, I think, the same pattern of accusations against Herschel Walker. But on top of that, he was a flawed candidate because he simply couldn't get a very good grasp of the issues. All he would do is, repeat himself and talk a lot about how, he's this candidate that's more about Christian love and bringing people together and things like that. All positive things, but that doesn't make him a candidate who can speak to the issue and bring it to the voters. There have also been some candidates, by the way, in the past who are, similar cases to Herschel Walker, who I think were, robbed simply because they didn't have an advantage, right? But, an advantage in terms of funding and in terms of media coverage. But I think with him, he was just a weak person. He didn't have the real intellectual heft to actually deal with the race. And I'm not afraid to say this. I think it's sad to say it, but it's true. That being said, I don't think that Democrats who were making fun of his mental faculties or whatever, and saying that he was a CTE victim and that he'd taken too many blows to the head during his NFL career, and yet at the same time, these are people who they yell bloody murder if you bring up the fact that John Fetterman had a stroke and he can barely communicate, period. John Fetterman, it might be one of the worst political candidates of all time based on his communicating skills since he had that stroke. So, it's a rough situation, I think, for people who were pulling for Walker to win. But it shouldn't be unexpected. I think I have a spammer here, so yeah, I'm gonna have to get rid of this guy. I remember I used to do live streams all the time. There'd be lots of spammers, and it would be funny because you'd ban one and then 5 others would come. It was pretty funny back in the day. YouTube seems to have cleaned that up. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like they have any people who can find your stream anymore. So, this is largely for the benefit of people who watch this on the replay. So, that's it. We're not going to talk more about the Walker-Warnock race. Too bad. Too bad for the country, by the way. And I'll say this, okay? The country is at almost a 50-50 split. But it's pretty obvious that the Republicans don't know how to get the majority, right? They might be able to get a very large portion of the minority, but they can't push it over the 50-50 line. Why? Because they don't know how to reach people. They don't know how to communicate to people and a message, because these are people who are used to having it all spoon-fed to them, or they don't care, right? What difference does it make to Mitch McConnell on a personal level, the fact that he is the Senate minority leader compared to the Senate majority leader? He probably would prefer the other one, but you know, at the end of the day, he can take his shoes off and still remain one of the top 10 most powerful people in the country, and pretend that he stands for something. That's the meaning of being a GOP leader. It's not whether you can actually accomplish anything on any of the policy goals that you have. So I think this is a tough situation to be in, but America may deserve this. You know, people can look away for so long, and then when the reality that they've created spits in their face, who are they supposed to blame? They should only blame the person in the mirror, right? Senator Warnock, he's going to serve another 6 years. Part of those 6 years, if not, you know, maybe all of them. I don't know how long it's going to last, but a lot of the next few years are going to be in economic hardship. How do you think Raphael Warnock, or Herschel Walker for that matter, neither of them I don't think are economic minds. They wouldn't be able to actually propose solutions to get America out of the financial crisis that's ahead, because a lot of their message has to do with very, you know, abstract, elementary stuff. You know, with Warnock, it's about reckoning with our racial history or whatever it is he talks about. With Walker, it's more about bringing people together. That's not a strategy. That's one of the reasons I think that politics is turning people off. That you know, they think that all they have to do is play to the slogans, and then naturally all the pieces will fall together. And as for the important stuff that's out there, like the economy, I think that they believe that all that stuff will be managed by the adults in the room. That they don't have to be the adults in the room, because all they're doing is they're being elected in order to represent a certain concept, or represent a certain group of people. Yeah, I think it's certainly, you know, it's a depressing situation, but people have to face it with, you know, the full perspective here. Yeah, that's it. I think I'm gonna, you know, move on to the next topic. So, we're gonna talk a little bit about Matt Taibbi and his Twitter file supplemental. So, the last podcast I did had to do with the Twitter files and, you know, some of the media reaction to it. And Donald Trump himself reacted to this whole situation not long ago when he said that, actually, you know what? I'm on the computer today, so I'll actually go to his Truth Social post. So, one second. So, one second. He has he's actually truthing out a lot of the stuff by Greg Jarrett. So I'm sure Greg Jarrett is happy with that. But this isn't the tweet I'm looking for, or whatever you call it. So, man, he does way too many truths on this stupid app. I think I'm getting to it. So, 1 second. I don't know. He's got too many of these tweets. Anyway, so I don't want to have you guys listen to my dead air the whole time. So anyway, Donald Trump during the weekend he reacted to this situation by claiming that basically this revelation from the Twitter files means that all of the rules and laws have to be thrown out, and we have to basically go back to what it was in 2020, reverse everything, the constitutional, constitutional processes have to be set aside. That's what he was saying. And 1 second, let me see here. I wanted to find the exact tweet because otherwise I'm just... Here we go. This is the one. And it got the most attention. It said, so with the revelation of massive and widespread fraud and deception and working closely with big tech companies, the DNC and the Democratic Party, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner, or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Our great, quote, founders did not want and would not condone false and fraudulent elections. So I think that this is some of the worst wishful thinking I've ever seen. I agree that what was revealed in the Twitter files and what stands to be revealed even more now, because there's going to be more coming out, and we'll get to some of that in a couple minutes. I agree that it shows how pernicious the influence of big tech and the intelligence agencies was on the 2020 election. But you can't go back. It just doesn't work that way. Now, I wish you could. I wish you... do you ever think about it that you wish you could relive a day that you know that you did a lot of big mistakes that went terribly wrong? So that's what Donald Trump wants to do for the last 2 years. And I think a lot of people would want that to be relived. They'd want the clock to turn back and be able to redo everything they've done over the past 2 years, the things that they've done wrong. But it's just, that's not the way the system works, right? We live in the real world, and Donald Trump isn't proposing a real world solution. He's proposing basically a movie, Hollywood movie solution where, it's all a dream and you wake up and suddenly the right person is president again. And that's not the way the world works. And it shows, frankly, people were yelling that this means that he is trying to tear up the Constitution and everything. No, this doesn't mean he's trying to tear up the Constitution. This is saying that basically he sees that this type of fraud, this type of tampering with the system, the Constitution doesn't address it, and therefore you have to throw out the results and start fresh, or you have to put him back into power. But that's not what happens. when you when something like this occurs. You actually have, you know what, I'm going to go into the Matt Taibbi thread, but the constitutional protections are lacking in this case, but that doesn't mean that you just do what Donald Trump is saying that you should do. Matt Taibbi says, this is the Twitter Files supplemental. On Friday, the first installment of the Twitter Files was published here. We expect to publish more over the weekend. Many wondered why there was a delay. We can now tell you part of the reason why. On Tuesday, Twitter Deputy General Counsel and former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker was fired. Among the reasons, vetting the first batch of Twitter files without knowledge of new management. So apparently, Jim Baker, who was the Deputy General Counsel of Twitter, took it on himself to go through the different emails and records that were being shared with Matt Taibbi and to screen them. And why would that be important? Because Jim Baker was intimately involved in the whole process that we're talking about, in this whole, in this whole interaction between the FBI and Twitter during the run-up to the election. So him being involved in deciding which files were going to be shared with Matt Taibbi was actually a direct conflict of interest on his part. Now, it's not a criminal conflict of interest, but it shows that he is both involved in the case and also trying to influence how the new management of the company is dealing with it. And that definitely should be seen as a reason to fire him. It shows that he thinks that he's insinuating himself into a situation that he wasn't even invited to be a part of, right? Because he's already involved as a player. He can't be involved in as one of the people who is analyzing it. So Matt Taibbi continues. The process for producing the Twitter files involved delivery to two journalists, Bari Weiss and me, via a lawyer close to new management. However, after the initial batch, things became complicated. Over the weekend, while we both dealt with obstacles to new searches, it was Bari Weiss who discovered that the person in charge of releasing the files was someone named Jim. When she called to ask Jim's last name, the answer back, Jim Baker. My jaw hit the floor, says Weiss. The first batch of files both reporters received was marked Spectra Baker emails. Baker is a controversial figure. He has been something of a zealot of FBI controversies dating back to 2016. From the Steele dossier to the Alpha server mess. He resigned in 2018 after an investigation into leaks to the press. So this is a person well known for being involved in the whole Russian collusion case. And the reference to Zelig, that's a Woody Allen movie, basically, of a guy who seems to be showing up at very auspicious times in history. So that's the reference to Jim Baker. Then he says, the news that Baker was reviewing the Twitter files surprised everyone involved, to say the least. New Twitter chief Elon Musk acted quickly to, quote, exit Baker Tuesday. Reporters resumed searches through Twitter files materials, a lot of it today. The next installment of the Twitter files will appear at Bari Weiss. Stay tuned. And then there are people who are responding. Let me see here. So this is a parody tweet, I think, over here, where he's denying that he was So yeah, that was a fake Truth Social post. I just wanted to see the replies. So there was a reply here, just to clarify for those of you that might be watching. The fake Truth Social post, it is funny. It says Donald Trump says, "I have never heard of the Trump Organization before. Clearly fake and probably run by Hunter Biden. Big witch hunt, worse than Jesus. Sad, believe me. Biggest fake news since the 2020 election, which I won bigly." And then there's a quotation mark at the end. So it is funny, but you have to think of it this way. Donald Trump today, his company was convicted of a number of financial crimes, criminally convicted, and then you also have this whole, the fallout from the Twitter files and everything. It sincerely, in my mind, points to a two-tiered system of justice. Look, I get it that there's a lot of people who are going through things that are much worse than what Donald Trump is going through, but their single-minded pursuit of him, all they're doing is they're keeping him in the news for scandals. It's almost as if it serves the Democrats better never to convict him and to keep him free but constantly under prosecution, because that way they can continue to focus on him instead of the media being able to look back at them and say, but wait a second, you run the country. Now, here are some of the reactions to the Twitter files. Now, let me recap for a second the essence of this scandal. Basically, the Twitter files is the revelation of backdoor contacts between the Twitter management and members of the FBI and other intelligence agencies, where they were told to expect that there would be hacked materials that would be presented as a news story, and for them to be ready and willing to censor those tweets. And then the response to it has been that the problem isn't that the FBI told them that they should censor the tweets, or that they gave them clear direction and clear direction as to what the nature of the tweets would be. In fact, telling them that it would involve Hunter Biden, it would involve material that was from his records that had been recovered. I don't know whether they used the word laptop or not, but basically they were telling these companies like Twitter that the form of the story would cover leaked materials from Hunter Biden that they would classify as hacked. So the people who are saying that this isn't a story, they're saying, well, it was really on Twitter to decide what to do with this. People like David French, they're saying, well, it was Twitter's decision, even though the FBI basically gave them this giant signal. You talk about smoke signal. This was like a mushroom cloud of a smoke signal telling them this is what you should ban whenever it comes out. And they're trying to say, well, it was really Twitter's decision, so there's no reason that the FBI was involved here. There's no First Amendment violation here because Twitter decided to do it. That's their attitude towards it, because they're patently dishonest people. They don't see this as really an issue where you have to dissect this and look at whether the FBI was behaving appropriately. All you have to do is say, regardless of what the FBI said or did or suggested to Twitter, the only thing that mattered was that Twitter made the ultimate decision, and therefore it's not censorship. And that's how you get idiots who are in the media who put forward opinions that are clearly so dumb that it's clear that they had to be, the only reason they're doing it is because they're paid to do it. Chris says, my cousin told me he didn't want to talk about politics, then complain about inflation of food and fuel. Yet, there's a lot of people out there like that. There's a lot of people who feel that way, and all you can do is prepare yourself, because those people are not going to look after you. They're not even looking after themselves. Think of it that way. They think that all they have to do is continue to go and shop at Walmart and buy their stupid Halloween decorations, or continue to go out to Starbucks, whatever it is they do day to day. They don't have to adjust their life in any way. But once they realize that the price tags are getting more hefty, they say, well, this sucks. Why can't things be better for me? I'm a good person. How come this has to be a political issue? Because the people that you elect make decisions that can affect you, right? And that's not only the people that you elect. There's some people, obviously the Federal Reserve, I don't blame on Raphael Warnock or anything. There's people that are unelected that are in big positions of power too. So I'm not one of these people who tells you, vote or else everything is lost. Look, there's a lot of things that are out of your hands, but you have to try to do the things that you can do. That's the big message I have. And some of these people who did not go out and vote for Herschel Walker and instead stayed home, and they're gonna grumble about reality in the next few days because of what Raphael. Look, I don't think that either of the candidates could actually save the situation, to be honest with you. But I definitely think that there's certain issues with Raphael Warnock, his abortion stance, and his economic policy that I think disqualify him. I think Herschel Walker wins by, a very slim margin in terms of his qualifications. But I would have voted for Walker. I just can't be enthusiastic about it. So, deep psychological need from Salon. Reagan speechwriter explains why GOP is so obsessed with Hunter Biden. So this is one of these people who is so, they're so proud of being a Republican that all they'll do is they'll dream up ways to dump on the people who continue to consider themselves Republicans. So it says here, veteran columnist, author, and never Trump conservative Mona Karen examines MAGA Republicans' obsession with Hunter Biden in an article published by The Bulwark on December 6th. The 65-year-old Karen, who worked in the Reagan White House during the 1980s and was a speechwriter for First Lady Nancy Reagan, is not a Hunter Biden fan, but she is much more critical of former President Donald Trump and his many allies in the GOP, and she finds MAGA Republicans' obsession with Hunter Biden laughable in light of the many lines the former president has crossed. And she says here, Hunter Biden seems to be corrupt, Karen writes. He traded on his father's name. He has abused drugs and engaged in other unsavory practices. He's a mess, but there is nothing relevant to public policy or civic virtue here. President Biden is hardly the first president to have troubled family members. But Joe Biden didn't hire Hunter at the White House, and if there is any evidence of the president using an official influence on Hunter's behalf, we haven't seen it. The Department of Justice under President Trump opened an investigation into Hunter Biden. President Biden has left it alone. It's ongoing. So that's all there is to say on her part. So actually she keeps going. Karen argues, Trump's Republican supporters have a deep psychological need for the Hunter Biden story, which is a distraction for the many lines the former president has crossed. For 7 years, the right has been explaining, excusing, avoiding, and eventually cheering the most morally depraved figure in American politics. That takes a toll on the psyche. You can tell yourself that the other side is worse, or you can tell yourself that the critics are unhinged, suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Whereas you are a man of the world who knows nobody's perfect, but then Trump will do what he always does. He'll make a fool out of you. Karen continues, he denied that Trump purposely broke the law when he took highly classified documents to Mar-a-Lago and obstructed every effort to retrieve them. And then, what does Trump do? He admits taking them. You scoff at the critics who've compared Trump with Nazis. And then what does he do? He has dinner with Nazis and fails to condemn them even after the fact. You despise people who claimed Trump was a threat to the Constitution. And then Trump explicitly calls for terminating the Constitution in order to put himself back in the Oval Office. So these are lies that she's telling. He never used the word terminating. She's using the word terminating in quotes. You scoff at the critics who have compared Trump with Nazis, and then what does he do? He has dinner with Nazis. Well, apparently, according even to them, he didn't know who a couple of them were, right? So these are all areas where she is basically trying to pin every single moral failing on him without actually looking at the situation. When you look at, for example, the dinner with Fuentes and Kanye West and Milo Yiannopoulos, Kanye West admitted that Trump didn't know who Nick Fuentes was, probably didn't know who Milo Yiannopoulos was. And that's a problem because Trump should have known who's in his compound and who's about to meet him. And he should have kicked them out, and he shouldn't have met with them at all. And that's the end of the story. You don't, like, I think that there is plenty to question Donald Trump's judgment about regarding that meeting. But she's mischaracterizing it by thinking that he was intending to meet with these people when he was only meaning to meet with Kanye West. So yeah, this is the type of journalism that you have here. And most of it, by the way, if you think about it, this is an article from Salon where they're echoing Alternet, which is another loser left publication, where it's mostly quoting a writer from the Bulwark. So this is what passes for journalism. It's just people who take massive block quotes of other people's articles and they regurgitate them, and it barely adds anything to it. So that's what passes for journalism on Salon. Another Salon article that I actually read from earlier this week, was by Heather Digby Parton, and she goes into what she calls rat fucking, which is this basically here. She says it's an old rat fucking trick from the Nixon years, whose dastardly crew famously goaded Senator Edmund Muskie, the Democratic frontrunner, early in the 1972 campaign into getting emotional over a fake letter impugning his wife. So what they're saying is that the Hunter Biden scandal is an episode of rat fucking. And the idea of it is that this is a political stunt that has no basis in fact and is simply meant to score points in the public, with the public by basically smearing the other person. Rat fucking is another way of referring to a smear campaign. But this isn't a rat fuck, because the truth is that all this stuff has been validated as being true. It's just the people who are writing these articles don't care that it's true. They don't care. It's Sam Harris syndrome. That's what I think people should call it. Sam Harris syndrome is this issue where people know that there is actual criminal proof. There's actual proof of a criminal act or conspiracy out there regarding a certain matter that's been confirmed, that the media has admitted to, and because of the political implications of what would happen if this was acknowledged, they decide to pretend that it isn't happening. That's what Sam Harris syndrome is. That you'll remember that Sam Harris had that quote where he said, he didn't care if there were dead children in Hunter Biden's basement, because he thought that what Trump was doing with Trump University was a million times worse. Which, if you look at it, is one of the most absurd quotes in the history of podcasts. It was on the Trigonometry podcast. For about a week, it was one of the most viewed segments. Let me actually play it. That way you guys can have an idea of what I'm talking about. Sam Harris, of course, has recently quit Twitter. Oh, this was the Bill Maher tape. So he's even doubled down on it. God, this was. Okay, here it is. This is from August. So I want it from there.
Even at age 76, Donald Trump's still got it.
So here it is.
When who knows how this election is going to go, who knows what the capacity for disinformation at the last minute to tip the balance is. Then what do you do with the Hunter Biden laptop story when we already know we know how this played out in 2016 with the Hillary Clinton email press conference where Comey in an abundance of scrupulosity felt like he had to come before the cameras, I think 10 days out from the election, and say, we're going to open up this investigation again.
Scrupulosity. Yes, there's nothing like scrupulosity. That's a hell of a made-up word there, Professor. But then, not content with defending the idea that the laptop shouldn't have been reported, Harris got out his really big shovel and started digging his hole even deeper.
Listen, I don't care what's in Hunter Biden's. I mean, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared, right? It's like there's nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden. But even if whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right? Or China. It is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in.
Yes, that's right. He really said that he wouldn't care if Hunter Biden was keeping the corpses of children.
So there you saw it. So that is Sam Harris syndrome. So the people who are writing these articles, like Heather Digby Parton, who wrote this article by Salon. So this is the way they explain it. She said, but mostly what the Hunter Biden laptop scandal is about is the dirty pictures. Sex scandals are where the dirty tricksters and rat fuckers of the GOP really shine. Think about 1987 when a picture of Senator Gary Hart of Colorado, Democratic heir apparent at the time, with a woman who wasn't his wife derailed his presidential ambitions. There is evidence which emerged many years after the fact. The Hart was set up by none other than Lee Atwater, the Republican Party's most notorious political operative of the 1980s. So she would consider that to be a rat fucking. Well, the fact is that somebody leaked to the press that Gary Hart was having an affair, and he dared them to follow him, and they did. And they saw him on a yacht with his mistress. And who's to blame for that? Him. It's not Lee Atwater. He should have just shut up and said, I don't really want to talk about this or something, or not run for president to begin with. But instead, Gary Hart, he told them to follow him, and they did, and they got the goods. So not really the smartest decision. She says Bill Clinton was known to be a womanizer before he ever ran for president and offered an irresistible target for the right in that respect. And did they ever? The GOP's sex scandal industry of the 1990s produced nonstop, prurient rumors so relentless and over the top that by the time Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky was revealed, the public was disgusted with the president's behavior, but even more repulsed by the sanctimonious gossips who could not stop chattering about it like a bunch of horny teenagers. So this is, again, this is a person, she's focusing on this one aspect of the Hunter Biden laptop that is only, obviously it became an issue, okay, because Hunter Biden has many dirty pictures that he had on the laptop, which, by the way, he uploaded to Pornhub, and he was having basically these orgies with hookers and smoking crack and stuff like that. So she has this belief that that's the long and the short of it. That's the entire interest of the story, not all of the issues that he had with Burisma and the money that he was making for basically doing nothing for them, not all of the issues with the China energy, the CEFC. I don't know what they stand for, but it's basically this Chinese energy company that they were basically giving him a lot of money, and he was supposed to kick back some of it to his dad. That's not the issue. So their whole strategy is to make it seem like because this campaign, because this whole this whole saga, this scandal, has a sexual angle, that it's only about sex, and that's the way they like to portray it. That the only and remember, they don't feel that it applies to them. For example, okay, while there were the goods, while there was plenty of tape, plenty of photos of Hunter Biden that made it to made it to the public, people saw it, right? They never think that this is the same issue for themselves when they were saying for many years that there's a sex tape of Donald Trump with Russian hookers in Moscow. So they're not the ones who are the rat fuckers. Only the people who are criticizing them could be the rat fuckers, because they just believe that it is, in the public's interest to know that Donald Trump may have had some sort of, sexual encounter with a bunch of hookers in Moscow, which they never could prove. There's never been any evidence shown. It's always been something that was referred to as innuendo. And people have always said, when people are always challenged to come forward and prove that this actually happened, the Trump Moscow thing, what do they, what do they always say? They say, well, we don't actually have the tape, but it's definitely out there. That's always been the excuse. Chris says, would be the DNC-funded new knowledge trolls pretending to be Russian Roy Moore supporters be a rat fuck? Yeah, probably. I think if I remember correctly, those were people who were pretending. Yeah, Chris basically summarized it very shortly in that line. He was saying that back in 2017, when Roy Moore ran for Senate. By the way, Roy Moore was also accused, without any evidence, of sexually propositioning some younger ladies. He wasn't even accused of raping them, to my knowledge. He was just accused of basically hitting on some women that were younger than him. He was in his 30s. I think one of them was much younger. Maybe one of them was even 16. He was accused of basically hitting on them or speaking to them like he was trying to get their number or something like that. Never ever brought any proof. And you can't prove something like that. How can you prove that somebody hit on you in the mall in 1981, right? Unless you have all the camera footage, unless you have, maybe a note that they wrote down on a napkin or something like that. And even then, by the time that the race was happening, it was too late for anybody to actually verify that it happened. So I would certainly point to that being a case of rat fucking, Chris. So that's an excellent example. Another thing that Chris is bringing up. Chris has listened to this show for a while, so I think him and me, we've always been a very similar mentality. I think, some of the people who continue to watch the show, I don't really have to necessarily outline things in order for them to understand me. It's like we just have, in some cases, just the same mind about certain subjects. So what he's saying here is unnamed sources say. That's an excellent parallel. What the rat fuckers would do, I love using that term because she's the person who brought this up, this journalist, if you can call her that, Heather Digby or whatever her name is. Heather Digby Parton. So the unnamed sources thing is when you spread a rumor about a certain thing that happened. For example, there was the rumor for a while that, let me think of a good example. there was that one rumor that was. Let me think here. So I'll type it in. So I don't have a example that comes to mind, but Trump. So this was a blog from 2019, from 2018 by CNS News. They're a right-wing watchdog, media watchdog, but they're usually pretty reliable. So they are right-wing, but I've never seen anything unreliable from them. They say, when you see anonymous sources, stop reading the story. It is fiction. President Donald Trump is advising Americans. Ironically, CNN, which Trump calls fake CNN, for its use of anonymous sources, also warns against trusting news sites citing unnamed sources. Look at the lie CNN is now in. Trump tweeted Wednesday in response to the network's refusal to retract the story, citing an anonymous source claiming Trump had advanced knowledge of a controversial meeting at Trump Tower, which is currently being disputed by one of CNN's now outed anonymous sources, attorney Lanny Davis. Anonymous sources are really starting to burn the media. At Fox News, the fact is that many anonymous sources don't even exist. They are fiction made up by the fake news reporters. Look at the lie CNN is now in. They got caught red-handed, enemy of the people. So then it goes through the CNN guidelines. Chris says they said that Russian hookers peed on a bed. Yeah, I remember that. So what he's saying is that whole rumor with the Trump Tower, the Moscow Trump tape. It would have been. It was basically him having these hookers pee on a bed. I don't know exactly who is into that type of stuff, but there's no evidence that it ever happened. So I guess it's just an academic exercise at this point. But yeah, there's a real problem with these fake news stories that are based on unnamed sources, right? And the Roy Moore case was a lot of unnamed sources. The case with the guy, who was the example so Herschel Walker, all those accusers of him, they were unnamed. They never named who they were. Unnamed sources also said that a Capitol policeman was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. Exactly. So those are the issues. That's how you do rat fucking. That you say, well, we're not going to reveal who said this to us, but we have an unnamed source, and they say that this happened. And by the time that the actual, in this case, an election has gone through with Herschel Walker or with Roy Moore back in the day, by the time that the election is over, they don't have to investigate because the issue is now cold. Who cares? This guy lost, so it doesn't matter. The same issue happened with Brett Kavanaugh. That wasn't an unnamed source, but there were people who came forward and said that he attempted to rape them. There were, I think, 3 women, Julie Swetnick, and the other person was Christine Blasey Ford, was the main witness, and then there was a third person whose name I don't remember, but it was like Rodriguez or something, and all of them said that he in some way sexually assaulted them, and then by the time he was confirmed, nobody wanted to actually follow up on whether it was true or not. So people believed it, then the issue at hand was concluded, and then it was never followed up upon, because that's not the point. The point isn't to get to the bottom of what this person did. The point is to disqualify that person and get him out of the position where he is a threat to whatever the media is trying to support. So, yeah, I would agree totally with the examples Chris is putting in the chat. And then she goes into this Heather Digby, the issue of Huma Abedin, and they were saying, oh, they smeared her by saying that she's involved in a sexual relationship with Hillary Clinton. Well, one of the reasons that people were focused on Huma Abedin being involved with Hillary Clinton, I don't know if it was only the sexual innuendo, which I don't think it was ever proven that they have a sexual relationship. But what was interesting was that, Anthony Weiner, there was stuff that appeared on his laptop that had to do with, or actually, there was commingling of content between her work life and his laptop. So, you had a person who was so involved in the State Department getting into very complex and intricate international issues of very sensitive nature. On the other hand, you had a person who was sexting people. So those are issues where it isn't just an issue of the sexual impropriety that's occurring. That's only part of the landscape. But it's the Democrats who say that that's the entire story. It isn't. That's what I'm saying is the rat fucking. So, I don't have anything else to say today. I want to remind you, of course, first of all, thanks for those that did tune in. I always appreciate you guys. And I know that, sometimes you can get a little long-winded here, but I want to remind you to go to all of these links. They're also in the description. So find me on all these different social media platforms, especially on the video hosting platforms, Odyssey, Rumble, and BitChute. Follow me there and leave a comment if you will. And I will talk to you later. Have a great Wednesday.
And today was a day just like any other.